This is when you get to ask questions to the jazz musicians to really find out just what goes on inside the minds and hearts of these folks up here on stage. So, who's got a question? I know I could count on the best neighbors in the world. This is Hayden Faulkner up here in the front, who is a cellist. He is a musician, he's a cellist. So, Hayden, what is your question, please?
This is an individual question. Out of all the songs that you guys have recorded together, which one is your favorite?
My favorite is The Ocean Blue. I like the first two a lot. I like the wacky, ethereal African stuff as well, but for some reason on the record that tune smoked most of us.
I like Bell.
Me too.
Yeah, I like Bell. Yeah, it's really nice. I kind of like how it, it has all the structure into this tone. It's kind of just goes way out, take it out, and then we bring it back. That's what I really like about that one.
My favorite was actually the last one, and moving on, just because on the CD, I think I probably got as close to the music on that one as on any of the others. And I remember on that tune in the studio, like we did 2 takes, and the first take, you know, was Dad and Los Palm. It, you know, it seemed okay, but to me, I said, you know, I can do better. And on that second take, I said, God damn it, I'm gonna go for it. And glad I did.
Mr. Ridl?
I like Spiral was the second tune that we played. It's a fast tempo, but I really like it because of the different sections are a little bit odd phrasing, and it's challenging chord changes, and also just the construction of the tune is a little bit different. So I enjoy that. A good challenge.
Another question. Mm-hmm.
You play jazz cello?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Soon.
Hopefully.
Right, yeah. Last month we had a great jazz cellist here. Tyrone Brown was here. Yes, John.
We have a 15-year-old daughter who's learning a lot of instruments, and the thing that really stymies her is when somebody says, okay, improvise. She says, I can learn anything, but how do you improvise? Can it be something you learned, or do you have to feel it? And you fake it until you feel it.
Well, we can pass the mic around, get everybody's opinion. Been doing this private teaching thing for a long time, and it's funny. Some of the kids, you know, they take it and they jump in the water, and then others are kind of timid. And the main thing you want to realize, well, the improvisation, it's like a spontaneous composition, and it can be, it's kind of the right brain meeting the left brain, you know, that creative spark that's in all artistic endeavors, and the left brain is how do we analyze this to how do we channel you know, some constructed thoughts to meet up with the right brain.
Yeah.
And it can be as simple as if we know the C scale, you know, by heart, inside out, and if that's what the piano and the bass or the guitar is playing, that's going to help us be a better improviser. But it's a lot about style and appreciation, and just be willing to jump off the cliff because there's no notes in front of us, and it could be a little scary, a little more scary for some than others.
Thank you.
Well, for me, it's not so much in the beginning thinking of scales or chords. It was emulating who I loved to listen to.
Okay.
Improvising could mean anything, though. I mean, that's the way I went about it. I think most people, most jazz musicians go that route, and they go off of who they love and try to emulate them, and then eventually down the road try to establish their own voice. But you know, I was improvising down here on Route 1. You know, when Google Maps messed me up, and And I didn't know I had to go to Kenton Square, and then I said, oh, well, I better get off the next exit, which happened to be 82.
There you
No
go.
problem, I got right here. It was actually probably a better way to come in.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, some people feel you don't need. I mean, you can improvise off of anything. You know. I mean, you think you hear a melody in your head, try to play it on your instrument. And I think when you get sound through your ears and you're able to get it on the instrument, you learn things more complete as opposed to learning it from the paper. You know. At least that's the way I feel about it. But.
One thing I wanted to add to it is that it's also what style of music that you want to play. But actually there's improvisation in all styles of music. The most prevalent and the most open is jazz. But there are amazing classical improvisers. And in the tradition before it got into the 20th century, a lot of the classical musicians, well, of course, the great composers are all improvisers. So there's this long tradition, and that kind of stopped when it became more of an interpretive art of what was on the written page. But I would say, whatever its style it is, if it's classical music, some of the simple, Chopin things like one page, things like that are, the harmony is not all that difficult. But just like Tony was saying earlier, if you emulate something and you get inspired by it, a lot of times that can lead to something. But it's not only your ear, but it's a little bit of the understanding of what the music is, because I think for some classical musicians, if they don't understand a little bit of what the harmony is, it's very, very difficult for them to try and conceive of it in a different key, for instance, But I think, country music, classical music, jazz, any kind of style can be improvised. So I think it doesn't necessarily have to be just only jazz music. Whatever you're in, for a young musician to give that a shot, and a teacher that can kind of course, guide them too.
Right. Thank you.
You want to chime in, Butch? You want to chime in on this?
Yeah, improvisation. I like to ditto pretty much what everybody said, but also add that, I think a combination of like learning technique, learning your instrument well, and then even learning like solos, like listening to a solo and just learning that solo and learning the notes that makes the solo, because the solo itself is an improvisation. So if they can figure out and learn that solo, then they can get an idea of, wow, okay, these notes go this way, go that way, and they can create, and then they can take from that solo, and they might even make a mistake while learning the solo, and they might hear that note kind of fits, and then now they're adding a note to the solo that's already been created. So I think a big part of it is just trying to learn solos as well, and then trying to take that solo and maybe just add some notes to it, take some notes out of it, and you can come up with your own thing, and then continue to listen to a lot of just great musicians in whatever genre you're in, and listen to their ideas and capture their ideas, and not only the solos themselves, but try to get into the mood of the solo, because solos can be very moody. You can listen to one solo and it can have such great drive, and then some solos can have such a great laid back feel. Some solos have more notes than others. Try not, especially when you're learning, try not to be so much impressed with how many notes is being played, because there's speed and notes that young musicians are so fascinated with, and less is more in a lot of cases. So try to keep it very simple, and just keep it simple, and just learn how to solo very basically. Don't be in a hurry, just take your time, and you'll get it. You'll get it.
Thank you.
The apocryphal story about the prince when he was commenting on Mozart's music, right? Just too many notes. Too many notes. Right? Too many notes. Do we have one more question? One more question before we get back to the music. Yes, yes.
Not a three-part, just
Sure.
mechanical, carpenter thing. You have two saxes, what's the small?
That's a soprano saxophone.
That's the soprano. Now, the reeds have different thicknesses. Is the thickness the same for both, or you have different thickness reeds? How do you decide on that?
Well, you know, the soprano reeds is smaller, it's a smaller mouthpiece, and it's a remarkable thing how you put this thin piece of cane, and who would have thunk it up, you know, centuries ago, where you blow in this vessel called a mouthpiece, and the reed vibrates like a blade of grass, and it fills this brass tube up with, you know, what a lot of classical musicians or some think is kind of an ugly sound, the saxophone sound. But I personally, the reeds come in different sizes, and a beginner might want to start on a number 2 reed that's easy to blow, and then they go up to 3s and 4s. But I just basically use a 2.5 reed where I can get a sound with real ease of production. Yeah, basically.
Now, when you pick a mouthpiece, it's a hard thing to get that. It's been a while. You've had that one for a while. How'd you make that commitment? Did you test it, or how did you get it?
Well, you know, with the mouthpieces and with the horns, you're not wedded to an instrument or a mouthpiece like all your life. And on the tenor, I'll use a more wide open mouthpiece for some rock type of stuff I'll do. I was playing with this Motown old school band for a while this past year, and I was using this really free blowing one. And then I was playing some kind of smooth, funky gigs, and I was using something a little more narrow. But this is a real jazz mouthpiece. It's about 40 years old. It's an auto link. It's called a Florida link, and it's not too wide open, but it gives me the sound I want.